I'm talking about the bacon I just dropped.
Okay, I'm just going to tweet that I'm streaming this, and then we'll get started. Tamara, would you like to say some words?
I'm Tamara Fong. I am White Castle, and we host Students for Staunton. We're really happy to have everyone here tonight. And we've got some new faces, so it would be fun to go around and introduce ourselves. But to make it a little less stressful, we'll keep it brief. So each person, if you'll say your name and then either 3 words about yourself or a haiku. Do you want to start us off, Casey?
Oh.
Or I can. Tamara Fong, Linux System Administrator.
Okay. Casey Driscoll. Fast cars, fast websites. That's 4. That's pretty close.
You want
Matt Walters, terrible JavaScript hacker.
Okay, I'm Tim White, co-founder of Blogspot.
Back to you. Have you swallowed?
I'm getting there. Cody Taylor. Python testing idiot.
All right.
Shayna Diamond, who'syourwebsite.com.
All right.
Ian McRae, I hate haikus.
Holly Davies, computer science, small.
Michael Blinn, charity rocking. Oh wait, it's supposed to be 3 first, isn't it? I think it's charity rocking. Awesome. 3 words.
Fred.
I'm Fred McDavid, rabbit hole excavator. Ben Humphreys, Java web developer.
Kendall Miller, haikus don't make sense. I don't know why we do them. Pizza, beer, and cake.
I'm Kevin Radloff. I like pizza.
Josh Brown, annoyed with promoted.
Patrick Kingsley, developer, Ruby on Rails.
Developer Ruby on Rails. Isn't that 4?
You're set.
All right.
Supposed to be 3 words.
Oh, it's 3 words.
Close enough.
Developer Ruby on.
All right. Take it away.
Let's do it. Okay. How many people have experience with user experience in the first place? Just kind of vaguely raise your hands. Not Josh. Okay, good. So we kind of know about it, but not really, and you all want more information. Because that's where I was like a week ago, and then I signed up to do this talk, read a few books, and now we're here. Just kidding. It was 2 weeks ago. Okay. So tonight we're going to talk about user experience. I've run through this in my head like a dozen times, and I have these really awesome quips that I'm going to forget about as we go through, but we'll piece it together and it'll be great. My name is Casey. I'm from Harrisonburg, but I'm actually from Wisconsin. I moved down last summer to follow my girlfriend to JMU. We're still together, so that's good. She's a stats, actually doctoral candidate now, so that's very exciting for us. It's very lively, a lot of discussion about numbers, and it's not boring at all. It's actually not boring. It's just really super intense all the time. I'm a web app developer by trade, and I do like freelance consulting. So actually the idea was when we moved down to Virginia, I should be flexible and free to do wherever I need to be at any time because she's going to move colleges for the next half decade or whatever. So I do a lot of Rails stuff and WordPress stuff. Right now I'm consulting for a company called SciTent downtown Charlottesville. They don't have a really good local PR like campaign or marketing, so nobody knows who they are, but they're right by like Staples and the Omni Hotel. There's this like nondescript building. You probably know the coffee shop better, but they do e-learning stuff. We're building like this WordPress and Rails connected e-learning products like thing. It's pretty neat. If you have questions, you can ask me about it afterwards. But I consult for them until I get fed up, and then I'll go somewhere else. Just kidding, maybe. Yeah, so I am a full stack developer, which means lots of things these days. But what I am finding is I really enjoy like project management, like as a hobby of mine, and like seeing the big picture. And I enjoy thinking about big picture sort of things. And this sort of naturally leads me into UX because it combines a lot of different disciplines that kind of orchestrate together. Yeah, so let's see what we got. Okay, right. So I wanted to do this presentation because I wanted to force myself to learn something more about it so I can be intelligent and maybe get mastery of it. And when I approached Tamara, I had read a book about it and I kind of know a little bit, but I learned 2 major lessons doing this, and this will kind of like encapsulate the whole talk. One is that I'm not qualified to give this presentation at all. I know a lot, and I can help you guys a lot tonight because I know a lot of like the major frameworks and how things flow together. But going through it, particularly when I had to like actually make the sides and write up the script and what I'm going to talk about, I realized every like major milestone is just an enormous sub-industry of like a major discipline that's in like formation and nobody really knows what's going on. And yeah, so I'm hardly qualified to give this presentation, particularly because my day job is like web application developer, but it's an exciting adventure altogether. So we're going to power through it. And the second thing is what this really is about is not so much UX, but is although UX can't be like looked at in a vacuum. It's really an argument, a conversation between strategy versus tactics. And if you're not familiar with the 2 terms, kind of like in a war metaphor, when you use strategy in a war, you decide like economic sanctions and like battlefield positions and how you're going to run supply lines and things like that, upgrading the right kind of equipment. Like I'm thinking like 1800s Napoleon. But tactics is when you're on the battlefield itself and how you're going to operate and maneuver back and forth and like outflank the competition, that sort of thing. So there's the high level strategy, how we're going to get started, and there's like the low level tactics, what are we going to do? And you'll see this, and I'm hoping we can have a discussion afterwards about basically agile and lean development. What the heck does that mean? And how do we position ourselves so that we can make critical decisions when that matters? UX should help you guys give you guys a good overview of making the right decisions at the right time. That's what UX is, and that's what we're going to do. I really like having conversations, and it is the 3rd slide now. I feel like I've hit a flow. So if you guys want to interrupt, I'm better on my feet. Like if you have questions or comments or something, we can chat about it while it's going on. Okay, yeah, so I made this definition up. It's a combination of disciplines that maximize the impact of a product lifecycle. This whole talk is really abstract. There's a 3rd part that's only kind of half written. That's like a tangible. If we're building a website, these are the steps we'll take. But this is sort of the abstract definition that we'll get before that. So really all user experience is this giant umbrella that combines a whole bunch of different disciplines that helps keep, not only gets the product off the ground or the project or whatever you're working on, but it also thinks long-term as far as like business propositions, marketing position, how you're going to make sales or keep it going like 3 years down the line, things like that. Okay. So I've borrowed a lot of stuff from Reddit, so you might, sorry. No, come on in. So there's 2 roles that each of you play because you're like digital professionals. I'm assuming most of you are digital professionals. The way we went around the room, working in some aspect of technology, whether it's like low-level stack embedded stuff or high-level application development or whatnot. One is you use 21st century technology, and there's always somebody making it for you somewhere else, and you get goofy stuff like this. And it's this, I mean, we all have personal quirks.
And your family blames you for those.
Right, exactly, yeah, because we all know each other, right? Like, I think of like Windows 8, when that came out, and that completely changed the UI, and everybody got really upset, even though they put a lot of research into it, and it was really smart as users. Like, this isn't acceptable because we kind of had a pathway set up. Or when Office 2007 came out, the ribbon, right? That caused major waves because we were using this for 2 decades and suddenly like everything's just kind of changed. That's from a user standpoint. And then of course, as digital professionals, we have this, which is extraordinarily famous. If you haven't seen this, welcome to the club. Now you're a digital professional. Kind of take a minute to read through the panels. I'm assuming you're all only here and haven't left the industry because you haven't experienced this enough yet. Or somebody's just paying you way too well. But this is the day-to-day for most of us. And when people stop, like, if you can't read it, I can read it out loud too. Basically, it just goes through what the customer, how the customer explained it, how the project manager understood it, how the engineer designed it, how the programmer wrote it, how the sales executive described it. Of course, the marketing and sales. It wasn't documented at all. What operations installed. So I guess I'd be like DevOps and didn't install very well. Their build on a roller coaster, helped us, killed it. And what the customer really needed through all this was the tire hanging from the tree. Yeah, so this is, we have both the first slide with the button thing was our user interpretation as users of this technology and building this, and we see this duality, and people, they blame it all on us because we all know each other, we're professionals. So the important piece of this, oh no. Can you put up the volume again? Okay.
It may have just gotten choppy.
So what this all ties into is user expectations. Interpreting what you think somebody wants compared to what the actual thing that you're supposed to deliver. What's the best thing to connect? And that's what user experience is all about.
To be fair, it's not a cake so much as it is a vegetable loaf. You got your mushrooms, your alfalfa sprouts, your spinach, and I had it sweetened with fruit punch.
But did they ask you to bring a vegetable loaf or a cake?
No, a cake. It's so much healthier.
So not only does this thing exist, but now you've deprived everyone of cake.
Come on.
So it's a bit choppy, but you guys got the premise, right? So you call it a cake, but if it's not a cake, if the user expectation is missing, you're going to have problems like this. So,
Thank you for bringing me.
yes, yeah, there's a whole cake metaphor here. I'm hoping I can reuse this presentation and do it more into the future. So like I'm trying to do it really well from the starts, and it's not quite where I want it, but like I'll add more polish as we go. So the cake analogies and everything I wanted to use as we go along are like 2/3 of them are missing. So there's this cake theme that you guys don't know about, but that's why I brought cake, because it's, you know, it's layered like a cake or something. Okay, so yeah, you might be familiar with this image if you're like a techie that works on the Linux system or just sort of read a lot. This is like the OS layer, right? And if you have a really great job, this is your day-to-day. You're talking between levels, like maybe you are a bash contributor and you have to like work with the drivers or drivers to the kernel or something like that. Or maybe you're an application developer like me, and this is your tech stack. I threw Maria in there because that's cool, right? Or is that like 2012 and we don't talk about that anymore? I don't know. And if you're not familiar with these terms, that's okay too. This is just a representation of like the tech stack where different communications talk to each other on a computer scale. There's no people involved. But of course, outside of these realms on either side is this abstract people layer that ultimately has to interact with things. So that's where we come in, and even though if we're professional developers who are working with things that are computer to computer, we still have to ultimately be responsible for the people who are touching these systems. Okay, dang it. So the lead up, I got some jokes now. The lead up to this is gonna be a little better. I lost some momentum there, but we're gonna do it anyways. It's gonna be good. So if you haven't heard of this people layer, yeah. So people, yeah. See, no, the lead up is just wrong. So okay. So if you're working in like an embedded system or something, and your technology day to day is you're not communicating, you're only communicating with other machines. That's a glorious job, right? Because there are simple expectations. Everything is straightforward. It's all ultimately in binary. There's no complicated emotions or anything like that. But if you have a terrible job, you have to work with these people machines. And if you're unfamiliar with the term, because I'm assuming you are, people are like a weird I/O state machine. They're like from the 1950s or something. It's really confusing. It's nearly impossible to start the damn things. It feels like they haven't released firmware in a million years. What else I got here? Oh yeah, there's been some reports speculating that these people, this technology, will be capable of intelligence in like the next 10 years or so. But I've read the research and it will always be 10 years out. So no, they failed. God. Thank you. That I have like 8 jokes here about how people, machines, and whatever. That bombed though. I will improve that for the next time. Okay. So running around the mill for the introduction. I think you guys are getting it. It's really pretty simple to build something, but to get it to do what you want to do for people is very simple. And I try to put it as objectively as possible. Your team or your individual staff or you as an individual has straightforward needs and abilities. You're building it for a reason, and your customers and users have needs and abilities, and you need to connect the two. And that's a very simple abstract idea, right? But it's very impossible to do. Execution is not that simple, but a structured methodology when you're approaching it can help, and that's what this talk tonight is all about. And hopefully, by running through this kind of proven system, it can help transform your ideas into reality. And this combines many disciplines. What I'm talking about is a specific book called The Elements of User Experience. I bought this for like $2 as an undergrad. We're selling these books because they're really old. So this one's like from 2002 or so. There's an updated copy of 2010. This is called The Elements of User Experience by Jesse James Garret. Garret is a world-renowned UX designer out of San Francisco. He helped found a company called Adaptive Path, and he actually, in a white paper released in like 2005, coined the word AJAX. So if you're not familiar with AJAX, it's asynchronous JavaScript, something server. Yeah, so he's bleeding edge, right? Like he knows what he's talking about. And this book was seminal at the time because it was like the real web had been out for like 5 years since like AOL or IE came out with 95. And so when he first wrote this, he was combining ideas that didn't really exist yet. It's interesting. He even talks about like references to search. I have the older books, but he talks about like references to like the search engines and other things. And like this is pre-Google. It's crazy. So I'm going to walk you through this book, and it contains 5 steps for starting basically from scratch and getting to the very, very goal. And that's the end of the introduction. Now we're going to actually go into the meat of it. If you get a chance, this book's like $30. I would totally advocate buying it because it's worth it. And hopefully this presentation will actually sell you on it. Okay, so this is it. This is the whole presentation. There's more slides, but this is what you need to know. When you get a good idea, depending on what your like specific discipline skill set is, and it's different for different people, but in my experience, there's a tendency to dive in, just go do it sort of thing. Particularly in less structured or less financed organizations or projects, there's a tendency of like, we need a solution right now, but just go start on it. Agile was a concept. Who's kind of familiar with Agile? When I use that word, what does that sort of mean? Or iterative development, kind of more? No? Okay, so, and I'm gonna butcher this, but that's part of the point, is nobody really knows. There's so many different philosophies and books on this. But there's this idea of like, instead of what was once known as the waterfall model, where if you're building a factory or a building or a bridge or something, you better have the plan set up from the start. And in the 1960s and 70s, when we first really started developing on software, we were using the waterfall model, right? So we would plan everything, and then we develop all of this, and it would fall like a waterfall, and we just develop it straightforward without changing it. And then, because of like the major digital revolution booms and stuff that happened in the 90s and the aughts and 2000s, with this new term came out like lean or agile, which is to pivot and do an iterative design and an iterative development cycle. So you don't plan and then do everything, but you change it a lot. This should have been on a slide, I think. Is this making sense? Am I going too fast or too confusing at all? So what this gets back to the strategy versus tactic conversation, which is a lot of folks, in my experience, and it's like a holy war out there on the internet, this conversation between agile tactics of iterative design, sorry, I didn't define that, which is like, you do a thing called a sprint, which is like you do a bit of work for like 3 weeks, you get a bunch of functionality done, and then you pause and you relook and you pivot and you ask your clients or your supervisors, is this what we want? And then you go to the next 3 week sprint. So it's not like 6 months or years of work at a time, but you do shorter cycles. And if you do shorter cycles without guidance, you can come up with crazy stuff that was never really in your initial strategy, which is why strategy is really important. So that's what the conversation is about. So in my experience, when you get an idea and you want to develop something, you typically start like somewhere in the middle of this. This is the bottom, by the way. This is the foundation, and you work your way up the path. And we're going to go through each one step by step and kind of explain what you should be doing. So it's important, and the whole point of the book is to start at the very basic strategy level and do each one in order so that you're covering all your bases and you kind of know where you're going. Okay, that wasn't scripted at all. Have I lost anybody? I feel like that was a better job of explaining what I really wanted to talk about. But okay, if you have questions, please feel free to interrupt, and we can go back a little bit. So yeah, it's a foundation. You start with strategy, you work your way up, and we'll go through each piece right now. Okay. So the strategy is, the book has a lot more information. There's a lot more information out there too, but this is just coming across the surface. 2 questions. What do you want and what do your users want? And I'm 28, I don't have a lot of professional experience, but what I've read about and what I've heard a lot about is people don't usually answer these questions, and they're so simple and straightforward. Why do you show up at 9 a.m. every day? Why are we funding this with millions of dollars? What is the point of it? Yeah, we can build this nifty new product, but did anybody ask? Is there a reason to this? What do people really, really want? And there's so many ways to answer that question, but if these 2 aren't answered in the entire life cycle of your products, you'll have less of a guarantee of its success. And that's really the best that I can say. But this is your strategy foundation right here. And from what I've read and heard, a lot of people don't answer this. So first question, what do you want? Which has 3, I think these are what came to my mind. Are you sure? Is it quantified? And how will you know when you get it? You guys know the expression, a means to an end? Or people like hammer and nail sort of thing. Like if you're working with a small business, for an example, and they are not incredibly technically savvy, they want a thing. They have a goal in mind that they want to get there. They don't know how to get there though. They will propose a solution that maybe doesn't make sense, which is why you have to ask, are you sure that's what you want? Or are you getting too abstract? Or can you reevaluate the question for the technical requirements to see if that's really what you're going to get at?
What are you really trying to accomplish?
Yes, right. When you're proposing a solution to a non-technical savvy person, they might propose a solution or have ideas for their website or application that doesn't really address the heart of the situation. It addresses the symptoms instead of the real problem. So yeah, you have to really double down, ask, are you sure this is what you want? And get the strategy of, if we build something, what are we really getting at? Is it quantified? All goal settings and combined with how will you know when you get it, is it needs to be falsifiable. You need to be able to fail the accomplishment, because that way you know that you can get it. So a goal or a strategy of get more users or make more money is lofty, but not good enough. It needs to be tangible so you can actually measure your rate of success as you're going forward. And this is incredibly important. And this is glazing over the top. I mean, again, this is a whole sub-industry of strategy and how to do this. But this should give you guys kind of an idea of how to get started. The second question, what do your users want, is also kind of a reflection of the same thing. Again, in my experience, when you ask this question, what do your users want? It's really what you're asking is, what do you think your users want? And that's just incorrect, because you're interpreting things that you think you know, but you're not really getting at the heart. So straight up, you simply want to ask your customers, and they might not know, or your users. But a help desk is a good place to go, or another support channel. If you, if you look at the conflict pieces of your application, of your business, to see where the problems lie, you might get a lot of good ideas for where the pain points are that maybe the industry isn't serving or the local area isn't serving, and that you can figure out what your users want and not what you think that they want. Personas, you could hire strategists that will develop personas. Personas are little abstract, imaginatory cue cards that this is Sam, he's 43 and an accountant, and he wants to use this city website to figure out tax laws or something. But it's a demographic, it's a snapshot of a demographic, and those are called personas, and you can build a fake audience. So you can think in terms of personas as you're building your application. book goes more into this. I'm not doing it justice, but look up personas, and that might help you. And then, of course, user research. You bring in a couple of different ways to do this. You bring in users to like your actual, I think of like Apple or HP or somebody like with a lot of money to do this, right? They probably have labs somewhere or like office spaces somewhere where they bring people in and it's like you got an office admin, it's all cheery and friendly, but just kind of blank and not really descript. And this is all in my head, I don't know if this actually exists. But then you're presented, it's like a research project, you're presented with like a table with a bunch of index cards. And you're supposed to like organize the information to explain how the user thinks. So they just go in and they shuffle it around. I don't know anything actually more than that. Look it up, that's something that you should look into. User testing, there's like eye tracking and a bunch of other crazy stuff where you actually can do the same thing, but bring them in and see what they're actually doing. Or like analytics will help with this. And analytics have gotten super powerful like the last 5 years where you can do little nuanced, okay, sorry, I'm ranting now. You guys keeping up?
It's
Sorry.
like sample juries, right?
Yeah, right, yeah. So yeah, like a sample jury would be like a persona. So you want a stratification of what your demographic will look like. But then like user testing, you want to know explicitly what they're doing so you can change it as you need to. And then market demographics, I think we know most of those are like television or magazines or something, like who are the types of people that will be using this, and before you even go to market, what do they want? And that just simply gets back to the question of what do your users want? Whew. Okay. Now, the unfortunate thing here, and I think why a lot of people skip this step altogether or don't even really bother, is because a lot of, I mean, particularly like areas like Staunton or just most of the world, this is all innovative technology. Most of the world, most of like the developing, like development industry, right? It's a lot of us don't have gigantic budgets. We want to get started. We need to get something to market right away, and we need to solve an answer right away. So strategy is an extra expense, both in time and money, that isn't really convenient. So it's easy to step over. But if it's an investment, it is a risk. It may save you money in entire projects in the long haul. I've been on projects that have just sunk because, in my opinion, there wasn't like strategy going forward. We didn't know who was asking us to build this project, and there wasn't any momentum going into it because it was just kind of confusing. So that's like the asterisk. Like for me to stand up here and to tell you guys, hey, go do strategy. Like it's both like super important, but also super difficult to navigate, particularly in the area just because of the way projects and budgets work. So, and I actually think like if you can figure that out, that's like this holy grail in the whole industry that can't be figured out, like how to balance strategy while moving forward very quickly, like top men, top minds and women. Sorry, they don't know how to do this still too. So this is a major caveat, but kind of important to think about. How we doing? Everybody doing good? Okay. So we have our strategy. We know now with absolute certainty what we want and what our users want. Or at the very least, it's documented. It's written down somewhere so all parties can agree on things. The scope is the next step, and you're very familiar with this. This is your feature requirements. The scope of the project includes all the things that will go into it. Specifically, what are the features and the contents that satisfy the strategy? And that's important as you're moving up the cake or the ladder. Every step above must directly answer the questions below. So that way it kind of funnels and you figure out how your project is, it's like self-finding. So you start with the strategy, move your way up, and you get rid of the bad ideas because you know because you're answering the questions from before. In the book, he splits this entire presentation into application development and content development as two different things. He calls it like hypertext system and like desktop system. And each half has more specifics. So I'm glazing over that, but that's represented by features and content strategy. Sometimes you're building a Rails app or a Python app or something, and it's really rich on database integration or third-party integrations, or what are the cool clicky things that people can do on the site. Those are features. And then content is maybe you're running a blog for a local company or just a new business website or something that needs a lot of information out there, and it will just have more content and less interaction. And that there's he claims there's a pretty clear divide there. So both of those are functional requirements though. Okay, so for scope, So I think this gets more into the preaching of the choir parts too. So if you guys have actual professional experience with this or feedback, or you think I'm misstepping, I think some of you in the crowd might actually be able to help me here, because I'm sort of greeting to a lot of this. This is just what I read in the book. But if you have like actual practical experience of, no, that doesn't work so well because of these reasons. But when you're building your scope, you want to answer 2 questions. Well, you want to do it for 2 specific reasons. You want to know what you're building, and you want to know what you're not building. And you want this documented, like the strategy, for all people to see. This is why you build a set of functional requirements. Is that the next one? Yeah. So do people know what I mean by functional requirements? This is like an actual physical documents that the 3 people, the 20 people working on this, the 2,000 people know this is what's happening. And the difference, again, between strategy on one side and tactics on the other, or like waterfall and agile, is historically you would build the functional requirements and it would be like written in stone, and then it would be cemented and buried in like a time capsule somewhere. It's not changing for the next 6 years because we're pushing this forward. And then agile came along and like flipped that completely over, and it's like almost to the point in some companies where it's like, we don't even know what we're building. We're just going to keep building things, and we're not going to have any documentation at all. And he's saying there's this happy middle where you write a set of specifications that clearly define, positive meaning like objective or forward. So you don't write in a negative, not like nasty negative, but like you don't write in like an anti-tone of voice. You write in a positive. So this user does this exact thing, not this user won't be able to do this thing. You're specific. The more specific, the better, because then it's testable and falsifiable. Did that thing happen? And then you're using objective language that's not subjective, like the color should be pretty, because that's a functional requirement, but that's not, again, falsifiable. So writing functional requirements is also its own sub-industry, and it's really tough to do to keep all members happy. But if you're building a project, it's really good to do, if nothing else, to have a document to look back at and say, well, we built this thing, and here's what we agreed upon. Any comments, questions, anything like that so far? Yeah.
Good set of functional requirements should take longer to agree upon than it does to complete the project.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes? Okay, good. Yeah. Which is
go back and forth a bazillion times.
right.
We're not going to provide that, but we need that.
Okay.
But we're not going to do it.
Cool. And that kind of goes with the expense of startup, right? Like some people will skip that step altogether and get into a mess down the line.
There was a study of government computer projects of the 60s and 70s, or the 70s, that I remember in grad school. The professor that taught the requirements course at George Mason was the head of the IEEE committee that wrote the document on software requirements.
Okay.
And he loved to point to this study that basically showed that 80% of government projects over the last 12 years had not come to fruition, and most of those fell apart in the requirements area.
Okay, interesting.
When it came time to actually feel something or show something off, you couldn't match it to any requirement.
Right.
You didn't live up to it.
Interesting. Okay. And for my take on this too, a lot of people, this will weed out bad ideas, basically. Like if a high-paid programmer isn't going to do it because it doesn't make sense, or if it can't be agreed upon by business analysts on the other side saying, yeah, we will invest and pay for this, it's probably just not worth its salt. And I see this on the street everywhere, right? Where a lot of people take on little, like someone's nephew, right? Well, I can do that web project. And the whole industry is just littered. I'm thinking like the web app industry is littered with these little tiny projects with very little professional specifications written, and people take it on, and the bad ideas aren't weeded out. So at the end of the day, you just get a really horribly managed and frustrating project, and that's sort of like the stairway to heaven, right? Like or I mean, it's a bad analogy, but like you have to like go through the bad to get to the good ultimately. You have to get out of that experience to finally realize, oh, there's a lot of bad ideas out there. And if you document and you are very good at communicating and explaining your ideas, you can figure them out and then finally move forward. Thanks so much for speaking up. This is great. Okay, so now you've figured out your strategy, what you want, what your users want. You've figured out your scope, which is what are the things that will satisfy your strategy. And now you have to take those things and you have to put them somewhere. You have to make them make sense to people. This is known as the structure layer. And there are two like sub-industries that aren't sub-industries. Like they're like you can get paid a lot of money doing this at the right firms. interaction design, and information architecture. And those are like the same split before with the features and the content. It's kind of the same idea. Interaction design is more of the feature side where your users are clicking through and they're doing one thing at a time, and how they get feedback and interact with that is the interaction design. The information architecture is you have your Wikipedia or something, you have just an enormous amount of content, or like the IRS or something, and you need to like share that in a hierarchical way that makes sense. That would be information architecture. Because if it's confusing, you've lost the user. Okay, so I'm really passionate about strategy. So that was really loaded. And as we go through 3, 4, and 5 here, they'll get a little weaned off. But I think they're more self-explanatory too, because a lot of people have experience with these top 3. But yeah, so it'll be a bit faster, I think. So as far as interaction design goes for structure, one of the major things that he pointed out, I thought was worth mentioning, is error handling in 2 forms. One is preventing errors before they even happen, and 2, providing a really great path for when it does happen. And if you can do that, you have 100% of all cases that will happen. And this, of course, goes right into, that's like the definition of user experience, right? You want to have a really 100% positive user experience for your clients. Yeah, I don't know if I can really speak more on that. I think that satisfies that right now. This one's a big one, though. I think this one is like between junior level developer and senior level developer. This one is, if you can prevent errors before they happen, if you know where people will go, that's a great thing to learn, or at least learn through experience, because you want to build pathways that make sense, and you want them to be intuitive. And if you, and that's why we celebrate really great companies that are able to do that. That's why like Apple's gonna get way overused, but like Apple celebrated for like easy to use UI or whatever. They were at one point, yeah. Mavericks and such has been a little sketchy. All right, yeah, so prevent errors before they happen and provide a response path either through software. So like if you have a PHP error or something, it just says PHP error, or like Adobe Illustrator crash or something, error unknown, like that's not helpful, right? You want to build pathways that lead them back to somewhere that at least explains either the technical documentation or have a help desk ready to go that will help provide a path, catch those errors, and help you iterate again on the next cycle. So either through software you can fix errors, or you can have a business side of it that will fix errors. On the information architecture side, you'll want to look up terms like hierarchy and taxonomy, which I think most of you will presumably kind of know already. That's just making sense of information from like there's different ways that you can model it. I think here, yeah. He had a bunch of different examples in the book. But when you're thinking about structuring your information, there will be sort of like an organic solution that will come out of it. If you like read it enough and you kind of understand where you're going with it, you'll want to, yeah, see, I'm like just talking out of my ass right now because I don't really know what to say exactly. But this is structure. Yeah, when you're at the 3rd step, you've figured out your content requirements. You'll, at that point, want to figure out how to structure the information properly, not even on the site itself, but just from a user understanding standpoint, connecting like things together and how to group them. This is just a hierarchy example, and this is just a sequential example, and there's a dozen other abstract examples out there. I don't know, read the book. Okay. Huh?
It'll be a graph of some sort.
Right. Yeah, I think actually that's what I'm trying to say is you will find relationships will emerge. And at the structure level, actually, thank you. I don't know if you're being a smart ass or not, but that was really good. Yeah, at this point, relationships within your information will emerge. Find what those are and then build links to them, and actually like physical hyperlinks in some cases. But you want to have an abstract pathway that makes sense for how you want the user to flow. We haven't brought up user stories in this at all either, but that's a major part of finding out what you want people to do. So we have the structure now of both like the interaction design and also the way the content is laid out. And now we actually want to get to the dirty work of putting this on a web page. So, and actually this one's just one slide. This is what's known as the skeleton layer. What I really like about this book too is it's all S's. I'm a sucker for clever names and alliterations. So you've probably heard of things like wireframes and obviously interface design and navigation. When this book was written, I mean, he has examples from like Southwest.com from like the year 2000 and stuff. Like we were just figuring this stuff out. I think the standard screen size in 2000 was 1024 by 768 or something, maybe 800 by 600. So like there was, we've gone through this phase. If you're not familiar, we got color screens sometime like 95 or something like that, 92, depending on the year. A little more back. Okay.
Wait, how many?
Wait, which one?
At least 4. I think
Wasn't everybody browsing the internet in Windows 3.1?
I think so. You know, this wasn't scripted, so just kind of lay off, right? Yeah. Okay. Design when it started though, when it was being converted from print to digital is really what I'm talking about, the conversion there. When it was really reaching mainstream and suddenly everybody had the tools to publish something. Design from a theory was static. You looked at a page, and this is what you previously did, and you have corners, like a bitmap. That's why you had like bitmap screens that did this, right? There was no flexibility here. But people were designing websites, so it'd be like, put this in the middle. You'll still see this. Like, how do I make it go in the middle of the div, like on Stack Exchange or something like that? People were thinking in a static sense of they will always have the same screen size. And when I went through the web design programs, like that's like the first lessons you're learning about, right? I went through like in 2005, 2006. So like they were talking about like the 3 possible screen sizes. Like they might have 1920 by 1080. So you have to be wary of that. Like it will be different. And then like freaking phones came out and then watches and everything else. And so now there's this thing called responsive design or adaptive design, which you might be familiar with, which is to think like you can't think statically at all. Now you have to think in like raw content and flow. You guys have some familiar with it?
Absolutely.
Good? Okay, all right.
I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
In 2004, we were redesigning, our product's been around for close to 30 years now, but in 2004, we were going through a significant redesign.
Yeah.
And part of that included we have a structure that was formerly binary, now in XML, that defines a database interface screen.
Sure.
And defining the screen, putting it on the server creates the database and the indexes and everything automatically behind there. And everything was very rigid. Everything was fixed by pixel.
Right.
Everything was fixed. Users would define a point size. And I was the only web developer in the group. And I'm like, can we have a style sheet that we can at least share among the Windows and the Macintosh?
Yeah.
And I produced an early O'Reilly book talking about an experiment at Mozilla called X-Forms.
Okay.
And one of the things that the X-Forms book talked about was defining things for different sizes of screens.
Yeah.
And I said, and everybody was like, oh no, screens are just going to get bigger.
Yeah, right.
And then, a couple of years later, when we're deep into this, in walks this guy with a brand new iPhone.
Yeah.
And everybody's like, oh gosh, how can we put a web page on that?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, I remember like going to conferences and just caught everybody with their pants down. Nobody had any idea. We just assumed it would be better pixels and bigger screens, and then we like have wall screen stuff. I don't think anybody really expected the significance of walking around using your phone to like the 80% level that it is now. And now it's not even a joke. It's not even a suggestion. Responsive first, mobile first, because like all of your user action will come through phones, or at least a significant amount of it, which is why you have to do user stories and figure out who your users are and stuff. But it's the most important thing here is when you're laying out your skeleton, you have to be ready to, you have to be paying attention to that. You can't have your own opinions about how the way it should look because it won't be helpful and your project will just tank. You have to be aware contextually of the environment that they'll be in, who will be using it, the devices that they are, and you can't build a static print-like display. You have to build it so it will flow and change with the browser size or the window size or whatever else. But now we have a lot of tools like Bootstrap is a really mature library, and there's a few others that use like columns and grid systems and stuff. And there's other wireframing software packages out there that you can sketch this stuff up and kind of lay it all out. But when you're at this stage, this is when you do it. You take the user flows and user stories in your structure of I want them to do these things in this order, and then you start actually laying that out without really any complexity through wireframes in the skeleton. And then you also add navigation in there too. Navigation's its own sub-industry. But yeah, awesome, cool, thank you very much. Finally, when you have the skeleton, the wireframes all laid out, you can finally get to the surface, which is where a lot of people love to start, but that isn't where you should be starting. This is, of course, what your users see first, and it's their interpretation of your whole brand and the whole ethos of the application. What does it look like? How does it feel? But you only do that at the very end. And these are things like branding. Yeah, so this is where you get to like visual language consistency, colors, typography, imagery, things that like pop or have the same consistent colors happening. One of the major things that he talked about that is sort of might be a good take home is it's one thing to have the same shade of red or the same font throughout your product or throughout your site, but a more sort of intrinsic important piece of user experience and of design and like putting this all together is this sort of intrinsic feel of your user must have confidence that you know what you're doing, and you must prove that like right away. If you go to a jumbled website that doesn't make sense and you can't see top-down hierarchy right away, or you can't see that you're being guided on a path, that's part of your branding. That's part of your your trust that you're building with the user. And so that's sort of a not very tangible thing to do, but it is if you just use some of these guidelines to kind of build a sophisticated app from the start that makes sense to users. That's sort of what he's getting at from the first place. A lot of people, though, middle managers and the like, will care a lot about this. And one of my first like websites I ever did was for like a puppy. It wasn't a puppy farm because that's a negative connotation, but it was a woman who bred puppies, little terriers, I think, I forget. And the only design rule was red, which I interpreted as red. I didn't interpret it as capital R, capital E, capital T, which was emailed to me like 3 weeks later. Like that's all she cared about was red. So we did like this flowing red curtain thing and whatever else. But it was, and of course I was just getting started, so I didn't really know a lot about this. But you still have that anxiety of like, well, let's answer any of the questions. Like, yeah, we can make it red. Do you just want a red page? Like just, like it needs information, it needs to flow. Like it needs to have some sort of contextual information. So yeah, that's the surface. And that's all of it. That's the conclusion. We walked through strategy, scope, structure, skeleton, and surface. It's called The Elements of User Experience by Jesse James Garret. Tamara, how we do on time? You didn't cut me off. An hour, perfect. 45 minutes or so. And then, yeah, I had some takeaways. Yeah, I didn't put on here, laugh at my jokes. So next time we'll do better. Okay. If you remember nothing else, talk to your users. Talk to your users. That's the most important thing. It's the front lines. You have to know where the problems are if you're going to fix anything. Start at the beginning. It's really, there's a lot of incentive to jump in the middle and just start building something, make it really flashy right from the start. But you gotta, if you don't have the budget or the time to do a full, like 2-year analysis of your users and everything else, most of us don't, at least keep that in mind so you know the things that you're jumping over and try to fill those gaps from the back. You don't have to do it all directly sequentially, although I would propose that's the best way to do it. And then, of course, that's exactly what I just said, know how the pieces fit together to prevent future blind spots so you don't walk yourself off a cliff. Ta-da, okay. So yeah, we have a discussion or not, but I'd be really interested to hear what people think. Did I make clear the strategy versus the tactic agile thing? Do people have enough experience with that? Do you guys have experience with that with the Lighthouse? Do you find yourself struggling with that at all? Or is that not a problem usually? To put you on the spot randomly. It's not rhetorical.
I mean, you mean more like every company has that problem.
Right. Any explosive or significant like
the idea of
anecdotes.
The idea of an every 3-week cycle to look at something.
Yeah.
I'd be glad if I get on my boss's calendar every 3 months.
Okay, interesting.
For a small company.
Interesting.
But
okay.
He's pulled in so many different ways that
right.
And that's why most of our company is fairly senior because we're pretty small.
Yeah.
And you basically got to run with that with any guidance whatsoever.
Interesting. Okay.
You get a 5-point mission statement, you're off for 3 months.
Okay. My personal day-to-day currently is micromanaging. Like it's too much. It's like a daily touch of like, hey, are you doing it this way? And it's like the opposite. It's too much. A user request came through and it's like, they want this insignificant thing done. Can you do this right away?
No, the point you made about talking to the customer support people.
Yeah.
That's what I think. I completely agree with that.
Yeah.
I mean, I have gotten some dismissive things. Oh, when I talk to Katie, oh, what does Katie know? Well, Katie talks with the customer every day.
Right.
I haven't been in a customer's office for 12 years.
Yeah.
What do I know with the customer?
Right.
But the last time somebody went to install this sort of system, it was Katie. And what broke for her? Now, if I'm rewriting that system, I should know what broke.
Absolutely. Yeah. I find it's a lot of like politics and ego that go in sometimes, and it's hard not to because it's your life's work, right? But people want to produce the holy grail, the most perfect creative thing that's ever been created. That's just in their head. Like it doesn't.
But if somebody's completely absorbed in the server development, he's not thinking so much. The fact that people are calling in complaints, well, that must be that customer support isn't handling them well, not that. Somebody wrote a bad user interface, and that's why the users do it. Or they didn't understand the server you wrote, so they're not talking to the server.
That was the basis of the jokes I was trying to tell before. You did a much better lead up than I did at the time. Yeah, that's what I was trying to get at here. Is like a bad developer, particularly, will stay in here and won't think. They'll think of efficiency or like caching or whatever else, but they won't think of what do the people actually need. Cool.
I have a question
about
that right there.
Yeah.
Why is Maria between Nginx and Python?
Well, the idea was length, right? Going up, LE for Nginx, MySQL. I went with Maria to be cool, I guess, and then P for Python. So that's all I got. I thought the same thing at the time, though, because it should really be like, plain. But when people talk about the limp stack, I assume this is what they kind of imagine. And I didn't think I'd be called out on it, so thanks.
I would just put Nginx at the top.
Okay, because that's like the external. That's the first hit, right? Is Nginx? Yeah. So that's the shell, and then that would go to, depending on how your setup is, Python first.
And then maybe you could put like the internet.
Right, and then people. Okay. So
cats. I mean,
so you don't actually have to like write that down.
Awesome. Yeah.
I would like to double back on what you said about the influence of hardware.
Yeah.
Missing from this.
Oh, okay. Sure, go for it.
You talked about how screen size
has
changed and how that impacted developers. But oftentimes, so my company, we do IT services. We're a managed services company, so we offer help desks. So we work with the people.
Yeah.
And then we probably call the support number that the software developer gives to figure out how the correct application should actually work.
Right.
And then we install the hardware. So we often are in the awkward situation of the software people shooting us in the foot. The customer has just gone out, they bought this great system that's supposed to do all of the things that they want.
Right.
And because the software people want to sell the software and they only test their software in their own little lab, they say, this thing will run on a 46.
Yeah.
It's great. You don't need any hardware.
Yeah.
Because that's an obstacle to actually getting the thing to sell. And then, user expectation is this thing's going to work great on a 46.
Right.
And it's a disaster.
He brings us up to when you're building the scope. It's like the first question is it even possible? Like, and he used the example of like a smell machine through the internet. Like, if your client requests that, it's not doable, and that's a bit like goofy. But one step above that, exactly what you're talking about, is like real world limitations of budgets and scale and everything else. And if you overpromise it, or if you market it or something like that, it can catch up to you. And that itself is a feature. Like, a lot of us, I think, would like something that works and isn't too flashy, right? But yeah.
Well, a prime example is I went to scope supporting a robotics company in Charlottesville.
Mm-hmm.
We have all these engineers and programmers there. What are they running their systems on? They're running them on 12-year-old Dells that they got for $100.
Right. Okay.
It works great in their little testbed environment.
Yeah.
But is it going to be really reliable?
Okay.
That's why they're all saying, well, the thing, I have all these quirky problems.
Right.
You know?
Those are features, though, not bugs. Cool. Anybody else? Yes, or? Yeah.
How do I put it in the middle of the div?
Line height actually is my experience.
Line height?
Yeah, and then
I'm
you
not sure about
then you go like be a farmer or something. So you're not equipped to be able to. Well, I'm gonna like shut this down officially, so like the presentation's done. But we can continue to talk, and
So the Chromecast will go back to shooting now.
yes, it will. Which is we need to get the quota. It needs to be half cats, half presentation for every presentation.